Hello everyone, I'm here today to do a video about the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction of 2024. Now the prize was announced, I think back in March was the long list and then the short list, and I think the winner was around June. But I have taken my time to read the books, and I have now read almost the whole long list. I have one left, and that's Vulture, Capitalism, and the reason I have not read that one is that the paperback doesn't come out until March, and I don't want to buy the hardback. I don't like reading hardbacks, and they're just more expensive. So I just didn't want to buy it, but I have read the rest of the books, and I wanted to reflect a little bit on the books, what I thought about them, and a little bit of what I think of the prize as a whole, because first of all, I think it is amazing that they decided to make a non-fiction version of the Women's Prize. I think the idea is great in itself, and then the list and the long list of books that they chose was excellent, I think, as well. So I was very excited to get involved. But yeah, for various reasons, among which like non-fiction taking a long time to read is one of them. You can also get fatigued, and the fact that many of these books were not out in paperback by the time that the prize was announcing winners and things like that. I did not read it in the time of the long list, but I have read pretty much all of them. So first, to give you a little bit of statistics, I have ranked all of the books and given stars. Now my star rating is a little bit different than most people. 3 is a good rating for me, 2.5 is an average book, 5 is like my favorite book of all time. So yeah, based on that, I have rated like things and made averages. So the winner was Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, and that I gave a 3.75. And then if you look at the whole shortlist, in average they got 3.58, and then if you consider the whole long list, is at 3.25, which is all above average for me. Not all of the books were above average. I think my lowest rating books were Intervals and the Britannias, and that is for different reasons. I just didn't get the point of the Britannias, to be honest, and for Intervals I just thought it was a little bit pretentious. And so yeah, those ones were my lowest rated. The Dictionary people also got quite a low rating. Again, it was a little bit of a pointless one. Yeah, I didn't love that one, but everything else got a 3 or above. I also found one of my favorite books of the year through this challenge, which was Flat Place by Noreen Masud, which I was not excited about at first. It was not one that I would have naturally picked up, so I was happy that this challenge made me pick it up, because I really loved that book. And then if I look at the average of the books that I was initially interested in from the list, which were Doppelganger, Codependent, Wifedom, Shadows at Noon, Eve, and Matrescence, that comes out as a 3.39 average. So yeah, they are all good. I think the results are very good for me. And I think from these stats, what I gather is that I should definitely read the shortlist, because the shortlist was like everything was really good. The lowest rated book that I have there is Thunderclap, and I don't think that's a bad book. It's just it was not for me. I'm not super interested in reading books about art, and the main reason I was mildly interested in reading this is because it was set in Delft, and I work in Delft. I have lived in Delft, but I think the structure was a little bit too messy for me, and that's why I didn't connect with it. But other than that, all of the books in the shortlist were really good. The winner was good. I was very happy for Naomi Klein. I think this is not her strongest book, but I think overall, as her career, it's a very strong way to start this prize, and I think it makes a statement about what this prize is about, which I really like. So I'm very excited for the next year. So yeah, based on that, I think what I am probably going to do next years is to read the ones I'm interested in, plus the shortlist. I do want to read the whole shortlist, and hopefully I can manage to next time read the whole shortlist before the winner is announced. I want to briefly give you reviews of all of the books in the list, except from Vulture Capitalism, because I have not read it. I think I'm just going to go in the order that they are in the website. So the first one in that list is The Britannias by Alice Albinia, and this one is the last one I have read, and I think it was... my struggle with this book is one of the lowest rated, as I said, of all of the lists for me. And my issue with this one is that I didn't see the point. Basically, this book, what it does is it goes through different islands in the UK, and talks about the culture in those islands and how many of them have a more matriarchal society in them. But there was not really like a connection that I could see in between the things that are being discussed. And also, like, I think that's reflected also in the fact that it doesn't even have an epilogue. It has an introduction, but it doesn't have an epilogue to say this was the point of the book. And that was, I think, the problem for me, that there was no point to the book other than discuss these random islands that she was fascinated by. And the other thing that I found very strange is that we have a map of the island, like the beginning of each chapter, but there is no map of where they are situated in the bigger picture. So I knew a couple of the islands and I know where they are with respect to the UK and Ireland and Europe, but the majority of them I didn't, and I found that a little bit weird. Like, it doesn't take that much space to put a map of where all these islands are. So yeah, that was... I just didn't see the point of this. The next one in the list is Matrescence by Lucy Jones, and I was careful about this book when I saw it in the list because the topic was really interesting to me and I had heard very good things about it, but I have read from Lucy Jones before and I don't think she's a very rigorous writer. And I think that was the case in this book as well. There were some terms that she was using that were not used in the correct way, like the definition way, that just felt like it was not super well edited or super well thought out. Like, for example, she refers to the menstrual cycle when she's trying to refer to the period, but the menstrual cycle is like the whole 28, 40, however many days between periods, and those kind of sloppy little things still are in this book, but I think the topic of it was treated quite interestingly. It's about this concept of matrescence, which is the time at which a woman becomes a mother, and that like fundamentally changes her, and she equates it to going through adolescence, and that's kind of change in which for a while your life is a mess, and then you become a new person, and the life that you build starts making sense as the new person you are. And that happens also during the years after becoming a mother, and even like before when you're pregnant or whatever, and that is not recognized as much, and the expectations that we have and we put in women and on mothers are completely outrageous, and she talks about all of that, and I think that discussion is interesting, and I'm happy that this book exists to start this conversation. I just wish someone else had written it. Then the next one in the list is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, which is the winner, we know now, and this is basically Naomi Klein has been confused with Naomi Wolf in the internet for a while now, especially through the pandemic, and this book is Naomi Wolf, and this book is Naomi Klein looking into Naomi Wolf, because she used to be a feminist writer and now she has become a conspiracy theorist that is in Fox News on a regular basis, and she kind of looks into what makes someone go into that rabbit hole, and why are conspiracy theories appealing to people, and if also kind of if you could see warning signs that Naomi Wolf was gonna turn out that way. And basically she just goes into this rabbit hole, and this book is a result of all that rabbit hole situation. I think she had interesting things to say about the topic, and I think she always writes in a very smart and very engaging way. And in this particular book, she shares a lot about her life that normally is not in her books, because her books are normally about capitalism, climate change, things like that. And this is a lot more about something that touched her personally, and so she also shares a lot more of her life. Not that it's a memoir, it's not, but she talks about her son at some point, which I've never seen her do before, so it is a little bit more on the personal side. I think on one side that is refreshing, because it was starting to be one of those authors that kind of writes over and over the same thing. But on the other side, it felt less sharp than her other books. So this is not my favorite by Naomi Klein, but I think it's still a very smart and very well thought out book, and that I appreciate it for it. The next book in that list is How to Save Babylon by Safiya Sinclair, which is actually the first book that I read from the long list, if I remember correctly. And this is a memoir about a woman growing up in Jamaica in a very strict Rastafarian family, and how hard that was, and kind of almost abusive the relationship with her dad was. And at the beginning, when I first read this, I thought it was not gonna leave such a big mark, but I still remember a fair amount of it, so I think I maybe underrated this book a little bit. It is beautifully written. She is a poet now, and she's very smart, and you can clearly see that in the book. And I think it's a very good read. It's also interesting to read about strict Rastafarian families, because I think most people have this idea of Rastafarian families or Rastafarian people as people that just lie about and smoke weed, and that's all that most people know. And it was a lot more interesting from this point of view to see like the actual beliefs and the actual thoughts behind it. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting and very enlightening and very well written. And the next one in the list is The Intervals by Marianne Brooker, and as I said, this was also one of my least rated books in this list. This is about the author writing about her mother's death. So her mother decided, she was diagnosed with, I think it was cancer or Alzheimer's. It was like Alzheimer's, I think. Something like that. The mother decides voluntarily that she doesn't want to go through that, and she decides to stop eating and drinking so that she can die and not have to go through all of that. And it's this like documents the 3 weeks that she stopped eating, and when her daughter, who's writing this, was looking after her while she knew she was dying, basically. And that was the goal. And I found it very pretentious, and it sounds horrible to talk about this way when it's about the death of someone that this person really loved. But I mean, the author was constantly quoting like famous authors and classic authors and philosophers about the thoughts of death, and I don't know, it just felt like if you are taking care of your mom and like cleaning her and showering her in her bed every single day, it's probably not the first thought that comes to your mind, right? Like, I don't know, it just felt like name dropping, and like nothing, like something that is trying to be deep, but it was not that deep. So I didn't enjoy this very much, to be honest. The next book in the list was All That She Carried by Tiya Miles, and this is about so this is written by a historian, and she took a bag that one of the slaves had and went through all of the elements on this bag, and kind of explains what was the role of those things on a slave's life. And it tells the story of a mother and a daughter, because that's where that bag came from. I think they were like, the daughter was like the great grandmother of the historian that wrote this, or something like that. But basically, a mother and a daughter. The daughter is about to be sold out to someone else, so they don't know if they're gonna see each other ever again. So the mom makes this bag with what she deems to be the necessary things for her daughter to have a decent life as a slave. And she goes through the things that were in that bag. So pecans, because they are very nutrient rich and they had a very important role on the life of slaves. And then some cloth so that she could make a dress, and how that was a sign of status for a slave to have a decent dress and stuff like that. And she goes through it in a very systematic and a very historical, like, accurate kind of way. Like, she doesn't say for the sake of the story, oh, this is how it went. It's like, are the sources that we have, and based on these sources, these are kind of the conclusions that are most likely to have happened, but we don't know for sure because the sources are incomplete. Which I really appreciated, because normally these kind of books are trying to build a narrative, and at some point you don't even know if it's becoming a novel or not. So I think the idea and the writing and the way that it was approached, it was amazing, and I could completely understand this was in the shortlist of this prize. The only thing that I can say against it is that I was particularly not massively interested when it had to say. I have read a lot of slavery stories, and even though this is a new perspective that I have never seen before, and it was looking at the very, very, like, everyday kind of things that slaves went through that maybe I had not seen everywhere else. It was not overly new to me. I didn't feel like I learned tons, and I was like really moved or really swept by this book. So that doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just, personally with me, it didn't connect the way that I would prefer books to connect with me. Talking about accurate or inaccurate books, the next one in the list is Wifedom by Anna Funder, and this book looks into the life of the wife of George Orwell, and I think the story is fascinating. After reading this book, I don't want to read any Orwell ever again, because he was a horrible man. He treated all the women in his life horribly. But I didn't feel like the author was particularly accurate in the way that she was portraying things. There were some things that were like possibilities but not confirmed possibilities, and she just ran with it. Then there was also some times in which she made weird statements. Like, for example, there was this time in which he was horrible. He was like cheating on his wife all of the time. There was one time that he approached a woman saying, "I'm attracted to you, therefore you have to have sex with me." And this woman was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, I need to have sex with you so that I can get you out of my head. So have sex with me." I was like, what? So things like that. And then the author goes to say he was probably gay, and that's how, like, try to compensate. But that doesn't justify anything. Like, even if he was gay, that doesn't justify the fact that he was being absolutely horrible to everyone else. Or like when he decides that he wants to adopt a kid because he wants to have a hair, and his wife doesn't agree with that, but he does it anyway, and he's not even there when they actually adopt the kid because he was with some other woman. Like, horrible. Anyway, yeah, so this book had a lot of things that did change my views on things, and I'm really glad that I read it and know all of these horrible things about Orwell now. But I don't think it was the best written book, so I understand why it was not in the shortlist. I think it appeals to me for the content, and that's what I got from it. But yeah, the writing of the book was not the best written book that I have ever read. The next book was Shadows at Noon by Joya Chatterji, and this is the biggest book in the list. I think it's one of the ones that I have read the soonest, like the closest to now, so the latest books that I have read, and it basically goes through the 20th century in the subcontinent, so in Bangladesh, Pakistan and India, and it goes a lot into the history of it, the partition and all of that, and how that happened, but it tries to also look into the more mundane things, like how did partition affect the religious everyday life of Muslims in India, of Hindus in Pakistan, how is their life now because of the things that happened, or how did that separation affect the foods that certain people eat, and how did food culture change in certain ways, or the entertainment industry, how did that happen, how is Bollywood a thing that didn't have anything to do with the other aspects of history that were happening at the same time, that kind of thing. So I found that to be a quite interesting idea, and I think it was very well executed. The only thing I can say about that is that I think it was a little bit too much for me. I think that I don't have the knowledge about that part of history and that part of the world to fully appreciate all the things that this author was trying to outline. That does not mean the book is bad or anything. It's really good book. I think it has a lot of information, and I think people that are interested in these kind of things probably want to read it and get all of the information out. For me, it was a little bit too much, and I was kind of overwhelmed. So maybe it's not a beginner's book, but it's an amazing book, I think, and it's very, very well done. Then the next book in the list is Codependent by Madhumita Murgia, and this also looks into kind of like all of the aspects of AI, the good and the bad, how it has been helping certain things, like for example it's being used to help doctors identify TB on x-rays and things like that, but also it has done bad things to people, like how these AI algorithms are calculating the rates on Uber Eats drivers, and the drivers don't know how they work, so they cannot optimize it, and the company doesn't want to rebuild those things, and then their lives are affected negatively by this because they don't know if they're gonna have work and how much they're gonna be paid. They don't have any stability at all because of all these AI algorithms, or how AI can take your face and put it in a pornographic video or something and humiliate you, because anyone would think that that was you, but that's not you, that's just AI created, stuff like that. Also, she goes into the people that train these algorithms for things like moderation of blogs and like Facebook, Instagram, all of those things. So there is a lot more moving into AI to do that moderation, but that means that someone has to train the algorithms. So there are people whose jobs is to stare at rapes and murders for hours every day to label them so that AI knows how rape looks like, how murder looks like, how all these kind of things look like, so that they can then take them out of the websites. And obviously those people have PTSD pretty badly. It also goes into more grey territory, like there is also training for more like benign things. So look at thousands of Google Street pictures and identify all of the lamps or all of the traffic lights or things like that. So there is people also that spend hours and hours and hours a day clicking on traffic lights, on pictures of streets. And for those people, they are often from third world countries, and they appreciate having a stable job that they can do at home. Even if they have kids around and stuff, they can do the stuff, and they are paid much better than what they were paid doing whatever they were doing before. So they are happy that this exists, but that doesn't mean that they are paid well, and that doesn't mean that they are appreciated in the way that they should be appreciated and are given the opportunities and things that they should have. So there is like, yeah, it's better than what was there before, but that doesn't mean that it's good, kind of thing. So yeah, it goes through a lot of those different things. It does, I have to say, it does go more towards the AI has bad sides to it than good sides to it. So I would say that after reading this book in the totality, you tend to think, oh, AI is dangerous, maybe we should be careful about it. I think that's kind of the message that is given, and I think that makes sense from what she researched about AI and from what we all know about AI. Makes sense to be careful about it. But yeah, it also has some aspects that she recognized are helping people, and I think that gives it a little bit of a balance. The next book in the list is Eve by Cat Bohannon, and this book goes through different aspects of womanhood, if you like, and kind of tries to explain where they came from in the evolutionary theory. And it goes back to the Eve, so the first creature that, or the first species that showed that characteristic. So for example, when we first evolved to be mammals, when we first evolved to have breast and have milk coming from the breast, what was the first creature that developed that, and what were the benefits of it, and how come that became as common as it is now? Or things like menopause, how did we evolve to have menopause? What were the advantages, the disadvantages, where are the theories, things like that. I found it very interesting. I think it's a very new way to look at evolution, and I also like that in the introduction she very clearly states that the reason that women develop these strategies is not because we are made to have babies, and that's why we evolved to have breasts and wombs and all of that. Is that pregnancy and birth and having a baby is so incredibly hard that for the people that want to do that, they need coping mechanisms. So we evolved to have coping mechanisms, but it's not our purpose in life just because we have those coping mechanisms available to us, which I thought it was a great start to the book. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I think that at some point it became a little bit, not repetitive, but a little bit of the same kind of structure over and over again, and some of the aspects that it was investigating were a little bit more prominent than others. Like for example, there is a chapter about legs and how the legs of women had to evolve so that the birth canal could still fit, which yeah, I mean, makes sense, but I don't know, compared to things like menopause and periods, and I think it was a little bit less, not relevant, but less direct connection. So I think it could have been a little bit shorter, but other than that, I think it was very well done. I think the perspective is very valuable, and I'm really happy that this book was in the list. And then the next book is A Flat Place by Noreen Masud, which I said it was actually my favorite of all of them, unexpectedly. This was not one that appealed to me at the beginning, but I decided to pick it up. I had heard good things about it, and I had decided to read the long list anyway, so I picked it up. And I really enjoyed it. So this is a memoir of the author, and the premise is that she finds calm in flat places because she grew up in a flat place. But actually what the book is about is complex PTSD. She had a very difficult time growing up, and her father was fairly emotionally abusive. He would not let his daughters go out in public without him and stuff like that. They had very, very restricted rules of what they could and could not do, and that created complex PTSD for her. And one of her coping mechanisms is to look at flat places, and that's why she finds calm living in flat places. She grew up in Pakistan, and she lives in the UK now, and she also comments on the racism of people assuming that the reason why her childhood was bad and complicated and painful was because she grew up in Pakistan. And she has to clarify that, Pakistan is not as stable a country as the UK, for example, but not everyone in Pakistan has the kind of experience that she has. It's not because she grew up in Pakistan, it's because she had an abusive father. And so I found that also interesting, that she had that racism aspect into it as well. Of course, the gender aspect of it as well. And I think it was very well written. She's very good at writer, and I really could understand the kind of thoughts and feelings that she could have having complex PTSD, and understanding the concept a little bit better. So yeah, I was very happy that I read this. The next book is Some People Need Killing by Patricia Evangelista, and this book is kind of a memoir of sorts, of the author working as a journalist in Philippines. She's from the Philippines, and the Philippines has a dictator, had a dictator, and he has this war on drugs thing that he uses to basically control everything. It is really scary. He would basically justify killing someone that is addicted to drugs because he wants to clean things up, and he believes, or at least he pretends to believe, that everyone has a choice. When they take drugs, they make an active choice rather than someone getting wrapped up in things and being addicted and not being able to move away from things. And so the author kind of goes more into the politics and what this dictator did to control the people, and how it happened, and people voted for him, and why people voted for him, and how he built a community to support him that was very strong, and things like that. And I think that the idea was good. I think it is an important story. I found the book a little bit repetitive. I think it was a bit longer than it needed to be. But I think that other than that, the storytelling and the journalistic integrity and all of that were very well kept, and I'm glad I read it. The next book is Thunderclap by Cumming, and this is partly memoir, partly art history book. It's about Fabricius, which was an artist that painted the goldfinch, which is a small painting of a bird, a goldfinch bird, and he died in this explosion that happened in Delft in the 1600s, I believe. And so she kind of becomes really interested in him and his life, and so she follows his life in this book until the explosion. But she also talks about her relationship to art, especially Dutch art, and her relationship with her father and how that connects to everything. And the book, I mean, the paperback is really well produced. Like the pages are thick and they are very white, and they have like all of these very nice paintings on them and all of that. And it was nice to recognize a lot of these things because, as I said, I have lived in Delft, I work in Delft, so I knew the places that they were talking about, and also I have seen the goldfinch and many of these other paintings. Most of them, they are in museums in The Hague that I have been to several times, so I have seen these things several times, and it was nice to feel the familiarity of what she was talking about. But as a storytelling, I didn't think it was amazing. I thought it was a bit messy how she melded the memory parts and the non-memory parts. I didn't completely see the point of what she was saying. There was also no aids. For example, there was a lot of paintings in the book, but none of them had titles. So when she was referring to paintings in the text, you were never 100% sure if it was the painting that was actually in the next page or that was a different one, because not all of the artworks that were mentioned were in the book. And I don't know, it felt a little bit messy. I understand that probably this was by default not appealing to me because I'm not into art history, but I think that also, as purely if I judging for the execution, it could have been better if it was a little bit more rounded up, more edited, more explanations were included, at least from my point of view. Then the next book in this list is The Dictionary People by Sarah Ogilvie. Sorry. And this basically looks at the lives of volunteers that make the Oxford Dictionary possible. And I think the idea of this book was good. I think highlighting these people that we never talk about was really interesting, and the way that it was structured. So it was structured from A to Z. So it was like A for anthropologist, and then she talked about a volunteer that was an anthropologist, or any other thing. She had one for each letter thing that she highlighted. And I think that idea was cool, and the idea of highlighting the volunteers was cool. But I'm not sure how interesting of a book it made at the end, because at the end it was 26 short clips of different volunteers that helped the dictionary, and I would have appreciated a little bit more on the dictionary itself. What makes it special? What, from a linguistic point of view, what was the novelties that it included? Because it talks about it having novelties. She talks in I think it was the E chapter, it was E for Europeans, and how this dictionary was revolutionary for the English-speaking world, but actually similar lexical ideas were already being implemented in other parts of Europe, but we never got to understand what the difference was, what difference this particular dictionary made. There is also some points in which she uses terms that I could guess what it meant after a while, but they were not super clear. She talks about these dictatas, which I understand is examples or when a word is used, but she doesn't explain that, and she just goes along saying how many of these things this particular volunteer did without actually explaining what it goes into making a dictionary like this. So yeah, I would have appreciated a little bit more of the broader picture of what this dictionary meant in the general English-speaking world, and what was special, what the approach that was different, what were the tools that they were using to make this dictionary possible, rather than the lives of these people one by one. Then the next one is Vulture Capitalism, which, as I said, I haven't read yet. It's the only one in the list that I haven't read. And then the next one is Young Queens by Leah Brentford Chang. And this basically took the lives of 3 English queens and kind of made the connection between them and explore a little bit more of the history from the woman's point of view. Like, normally we talk about the treaties and things that these kings sign, and the women are more like, did they give them an heir or did they not? And that's kind of the extent which normal history discusses these queens, and this book is trying to look at the actual political power of these queens and what they did when they were in power. And I think it is probably a good book for people that are interested in royalty and English history. I'm not one of those people. So for me, this one was okay. It was too long for what I got from it. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad book. It's just my personal interests don't align. And if I look at the list as a whole, I think the ones that were the most disappointing to me are the ones that are about English history. So maybe that's something I need to take into account next time. But yeah, I mean, overall, as you can probably tell, there were a lot of good books there. And even the ones that are not particularly my cup of tea, that I didn't enjoy, I don't think they're bad books. It's just my personal interests don't align. So yeah, very successful project. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you are also planning to join in following the prize next year. And at the next video, bye!